A freezing night, a runaway bride, and a lonely cowboy's barn, where fate ties two broken souls together in the Wild West. Their story is about pain, redemption, and love reborn from snow. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Where are you watching from? Let's get started. Snow had fallen hard through the night, covering the plains in a silent white that swallowed every sound. When Jake Carson opened the door to his barn that morning, he expected the usual: a few restless horses, the low creak of wood, the hiss of his breath in the cold. What he didn't expect was a woman, barefoot, trembling, her torn wedding dress stiff with frost, curled beside the haystack like some broken angel left behind by God himself. Her skin was pale as death, lips blue, eyes half shut. He knelt, his heart thudding, and when his fingers brushed her neck, he felt the faintest flicker of a pulse. She was alive, barely. He wrapped her in his coat, carried her inside the cabin, and placed her near the fire. It took an hour before her trembling slowed. When her eyes finally opened, they were glassy, confused, full of pain. She looked at him as if he were some ghost she didn't expect to see. "Don't be afraid," he said quietly. "You're safe now." She stared at the flames, her voice cracked like broken glass. "You shouldn't have saved me." That was the first thing she said to him, and it struck him deep, because no one who still wanted to live said words like that. Her name, he learned later, was Clara Weston. She was supposed to have been married yesterday to a man Jake knew too well, Samuel Carter, his neighbor, a cruel, heavy-handed rancher whose greed was as famous as his temper. Jake had heard the shouting from the church. He'd seen the bride run out into the snow, her white dress dragging through the mud, the entire town whispering that she'd lost her mind. But now, seeing her shivering by his fire, he understood. For 3 days, she said almost nothing. She'd sit near the flames, wrapped in his old blanket, holding the cup of coffee he gave her like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Jake didn't press her. He just made sure she ate, that she had warmth, that she slept. But on the 4th night, she spoke again. Her voice was quiet, trembling. "You're risking your life keeping me here. Samuel will kill you if he finds out." Jake met her gaze, calm and certain. "Let him try." Something changed in her eyes then, something fragile but fierce, like the first spark before a fire catches. That night, the wind howled outside, but inside, the cabin felt alive. She asked about his life, and he told her about the ranch, about the seasons, about how loneliness had become his only friend. She smiled faintly and said she knew the feeling too well. Then she told him her story. Her father owed Samuel money, lots of it, and Samuel wanted repayment in the form of a wife. She was promised, trapped, and when she realized what he truly was, how violent, how cruel, she tried to run. But no one helped her, not a soul. They all said Samuel was too powerful, too dangerous to cross. So she ran into the snow with nothing but her wedding dress and a heart full of shame. Jake listened, jaw tight. He'd never liked Samuel. Now he hated him. The days passed. Clara grew stronger, her cheeks no longer pale, her smile appearing more often. She helped around the cabin, feeding the horses, cleaning the table, even mending one of Jake's shirts by the fire. It felt right, like she'd always belonged there. But peace doesn't last long in the West. One cold morning, Jake saw 3 riders on the horizon. Samuel Carter and his men. He knew they'd come sooner or later. Clara froze when she saw them. Jake told her to stay inside and took his rifle from above the door. The riders stopped outside the gate. Samuel smirked beneath his black hat. "Morning, Carson. I hear you've been keeping my bride warm." Jake stood his ground. "She's not yours, Samuel." "Never was." Samuel's grin turned to ice. "That's where you're wrong." He spurred his horse forward. "Hand her over before I burn this place to the ground." Jake's hand tightened on the rifle. "You can try." The standoff lasted less than a minute. Samuel's men reached for their guns, but Jake was faster. The first shot echoed through the valley, sending a flock of crows into the air. One of Samuel's men fell from his horse. Another turned tail. Samuel, furious, fired back, but Jake's next bullet caught the brim of his hat, cutting a line across his cheek. He fled, swearing vengeance. When Jake stepped back inside, Clara was shaking. "He'll come again," she whispered. "I know," Jake said softly. "And when he does, he won't leave this time." For weeks they waited. Every night they sat by the fire, unsure if it would be their last. And somewhere in those nights of fear and quiet, something deeper took root between them. Jake found himself drawn to the way she laughed, the way she looked at the stars as if remembering what hope felt like. And she found peace in his steadiness, in the way he never looked at her with pity, only care. One night she said, "You saved me once, Jake, but you gave me more than that. You gave me a reason to live." He didn't answer. He just took her hand, rough fingers meeting soft skin, and in that silence everything was said. When spring came, Samuel Carter returned, alone this time. He rode into Jake's yard at dawn, gun drawn, fury burning in his eyes. "She's mine," he snarled. "You stole her." Jake stepped out with calm steel in his gaze. "You can't steal what a man never owned." Samuel raised his gun, but before he could fire, Clara appeared in the doorway. "Samuel," she said, her voice steady, "I would rather die beside this man than live another second under your shadow." That moment of hesitation was all Jake needed. The shot rang out. Samuel fell, his revolver dropping into the dirt. Silence followed, long and heavy. Clara looked at Jake, trembling, and he dropped the rifle, pulling her close. The snow had melted, and the sun broke through the clouds, painting gold over everything that had once been gray. Months passed. The land healed. So did they. Clara planted flowers outside the cabin, and Jake built her a little fence around them so the horses wouldn't trample them. At night, they'd sit on the porch. The baby she bore in her arms, wrapped in a wool blanket, his tiny breath soft against the evening air. Sometimes Jake would look at her, this woman who'd once been abandoned to die, and wonder how fate had led her to his barn that night. Maybe it wasn't chance at all. Maybe the storm had carried her there, so both of them could find what they'd lost long ago. A reason to live, a reason to love. And every now and then, when the wind whispered through the grass, Clara would smile and say softly, "You found me when no one else would." Jake would wrap his arm around her, his voice low and certain. "And I'll never lose you again, because in a land built on dust, blood, and broken promises, love was the only thing worth dying for, and the only thing strong enough to bring two lost souls back to life."